Israel has struck a displacement camp where civilians were sheltering, killing at least 45 people in Rafah in southern Gaza. That is according to the Gaza Health Ministry. We must warn you that you are about to see in this segment is going to be very difficult to watch. Well, these are the scenes overnight of the camp in Rafah set ablaze. The Israeli military claim 2 CNN Hamas officials were killed in the strike with what they called precise munitions. Local officials say most of the casualties were women and children. Now, you can see the location of the camp on this map. Now, it's a reminder that over 1 million people have been sheltering in Rafah as the war forced people further south, though many have fled yet again as Israel ramps up the operations in that area. The strike came just 2 days after the International Court of Justice ordered Israel to halt its offensive in Rafah. On Sunday, Hamas fired rockets at Tel Aviv, the first attack of its kind into Israel since January. We got CNN's Nada Bashir following developments for us, who's standing by in London. Nada, distressing video out of Rafah. A lot of that video we actually cannot share because it is so disturbing. Help us understand the impact of this strike.
Well, Akaleni, as you mentioned, many of those who were sheltering in this Tel El Sultan neighborhood in Rafah have been displaced time and time again. They have been pushed south into the southern city of Rafah by the Israeli military, told that this would be a safe zone. And in fact, over the last month, we have been hearing warnings from the IDF telling civilians now to evacuate parts of Rafah to Gaza's coastal area for their safety and protection ahead of a looming full-scale ground operation. This was not one of those areas. This was not an area that received an evacuation order. This was supposed to be a safe zone for civilians. Clearly, that is not the case. We've seen this incident overnight, airstrikes targeting an area that is densely populated by civilians, filled with tents, makeshift tents, sheltering civilians. And we have seen graphic, disturbing, horrifying video emerging from the scene last night. Tents completely engulfed in flames, charred bodies being pulled from the burning shelters, including the bodies of children. Now, as we've heard from the health authorities in Gaza, the majority of those casualties were women and children. More than 240 people have so far said to have been badly wounded and injured. We've heard from health authorities saying they simply do not have the capacity in the remaining hospitals in the Rafah area to care for that number of casualties. So this is an overall disastrous situation for many of those civilians in the southern city of Rafah. Huge amount of concern. Of course, we've been hearing widespread condemnation and warnings against further military action in Rafah. Clearly, those warnings have not been heeded.
Yeah. And you know, what is, of course, getting a lot of attention as well is this is just a few days after the ICJ ruling for Israel to halt operations in Rafah. We have seen some reaction, firstly, to whether Israel is going to be adhering to that ruling, and of course, the criticism of the way that Israel is conducting this operation in Rafah. What more do we know?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been hearing fierce criticism, of course, from European leaders. We heard earlier this morning from the EU's Foreign Affairs Chief, Josep Borrell, saying that Israel must adhere to the ICJ ruling, that it must immediately halt military operations in Rafah. We've heard from the German Foreign Minister saying earlier today that the International Court of Justice order for Israel to halt its military operation in the southern Gaza city of Rafah is binding and has to be followed. And in fact, President Macron of France has also issued a statement. He said that he was outraged by last night's attack on Rafah, that these operations must stop. There are no safe areas in Rafah for Palestinian civilians. I call for full respect for international law and for an immediate ceasefire. And of course, there is a huge amount of concern around the potential for further military action in Rafah. We've heard previously from one of Israel's closest allies, the Biden administration, President Biden himself speaking to CNN, saying that if Israel were to fully go into Rafah, then the US would not be able to support in the form of arms and weapons, that would not be the case. It remains to be seen whether this latest incident is in fact a red line for President Biden. This has certainly drawn outrage amongst many in the international community, particularly, of course, from the United Nations, which has repeatedly warned against a full operation in Rafah and continued airstrikes in Rafah. This is an area that is densely populated still with civilians, the vast majority internally displaced. And of course, there is simply nowhere safe left for civilians to turn. And of course, there are questions around how this will impact ongoing ceasefire negotiations. That is another point of concern we heard today from Qatari officials saying that they are worried that this could hinder those ongoing discussions around a potential truce between Israel and Hamas. Eleni?
Nada Bashir, thank you so much for that update. Well, the Palestinian Authority is calling on the United States to put more pressure on Israel to stop the violence and said the US bears responsibility for these crimes that shame humanity. We have not heard from the Biden administration yet regarding the attack on the refugee camp, but just a few weeks ago, the US president seemed to put forward a red line when it came to targeting civilians in Rafah.
If they go into Rafah, I'm not supplying the weapons that have been used historically to deal with Rafah, to deal with the cities, to deal with that problem. We're going to continue to make sure Israel is secure in terms of Iron Dome and their ability to respond to attacks like came out of the Middle East recently. But it's just wrong. We're not going to supply the weapons and the artillery shells used.
Well, we are closely following the response from the Americans, and we will bring it to you when we get it.